Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. So basically this is a parallel playlist that I am starting, which focuses on cloud certification. So this series is called Cloud Certification Catalyst series. So in this series the focus is on basically selecting a few certification questions which are easily freely available on the market, which are a little bit ambiguous, or most of the answers which are available on the market are not completely correct, giving you the correct solution and also referring you to the official Microsoft or Amazon or Google Cloud documentation and explaining the thought process, going over the documentation. So this is a parallel series focusing mostly on Q&As and certifications, whereas the other series is more on cloud architecture. So these are short videos. So let's start. So this one is on basically your AZ103. Okay, so Azure AZ103. So each video will contain only one question, and we will have maybe 20-30 videos for each of the exams and so on. So the brief about me, I have about 8 years of experience in the IT industry, with 4 years in cloud technologies and 2 years in cloud architecture. I'm currently in Accenture as a cloud solution architect. So these are some of the few certifications that I hold. Okay, the disclaimer again that this series will focus only on questions which I found are freely available on the internet, but the answers are either incorrect or sometimes the answers are not very well explained. Again, along with mentioning the answer, I will also deep dive into why the answer is the correct answer, how to think about the question and so on. And again, we will only revert to official Microsoft documentation wherever possible as the authentic source of information. So very quickly coming to the question. You have a resource group named RG1, obviously within a subscription. RG1 contains the Azure Storage account 1, Azure VM1 on Windows Server 2016. Storage account 1 contains the disk files for VM1, maybe it's an unmanaged disk. Now the question is, you applied a read-only lock to RG1, meaning you apply a read-only lock to the resource group 1. And what is happening is that they are saying that on applying the read-only lock, what are the stuff that you can still do from the portal? So the options are: A, generate an automation script for RG1, B, view the keys of storage account 1, C, start the VM1, D, upload a blob to storage account 1. Now a very brief about resource locks. Basically locks are something which will prevent you from doing an operation. There are mostly two types of locks: read-only lock and cannot delete lock. Read-only lock, as soon as you apply a read-only lock to a resource or a resource group, then obviously all the resources are only read-only, so you cannot modify them. And if it is a cannot delete lock, then you cannot delete it, but you can obviously modify it. So you can read the resource in a read-only lock but not do any modification including delete, and in a delete lock you can read the resource, modify the resource, but you cannot delete the resource. So here obviously, since there is a read-only lock to RG1, another concept, and we will go over the documentation again to basically prove you that what I'm saying is correct, is that if you apply a lock to a resource group, then this lock are inherited to the resources within the resource group. So since VM1 is within the resource group and starting a VM is obviously an operation on a VM, now since it's a read-only lock, I cannot start my VM. So C is, we can ignore C. Again, D, uploading a blob. It is a modification. I am uploading a blob to a storage account. The storage account is within the resource group where my read-only lock is applied, meaning the read-only lock is effectively on the storage account also. So again, I cannot upload a blob. Now here is where it gets interesting. When you see this generate an automation script, so when you see the word generate, it seems that you are doing some modification also, right? So mostly you will think that A is a modificational action, meaning if there is a read-only lock, I will not be able to do. And when you are saying view the keys, view seems like a read only, view is read. So this B is something I can do. So mostly you will think that B is the correct answer, meaning view the keys of storage account 1 is the correct answer, whereas A, generating the automation script, is the incorrect answer. But no, the actual answer, which is that what you can do is only generate an automation script for RG1, whereas view the keys you cannot do. You cannot view the keys of the storage account if the storage account has a read-only lock, and I will prove this. Okay, so the answer is A, generate an automation script for RG1. Now let us go to the Azure documentation to verify our answer. Okay, so lock resources to prevent unexpected change. So what they're saying, as an administrator you may need to lock a subscription. So the locks can be applied at a subscription level also. A resource group or a resource, individual resource, a subscription, resource group and a resource, it cannot be applied at the management group to prevent other users in your organizations from accidentally deleting or modifying critical resources. Okay, so this is the actual use case for basically applying a lock to accidentally prevent something. So for example, if normally there is no lock and I click on delete a VM, then just one pop-up comes, are you sure you want to delete? If I click on yes, the whole VM gets deleted, no other question. So if I have the permission to delete the VM in a resource group, then I can just go ahead with only one warning message. But if there is a very critical VM which you need, for example a SAP VM which you don't want to delete, then you should again apply say cannot delete operation. In this case, as long as this lock is applied to the resource or the resource group within which this resource is existing, nobody will be able to delete that resource. Only way to delete the resource is to remove the lock. Okay, only authorized people can remove the lock and then delete it. So there is a much more safeguard, and that is why there is very less chance that accidentally someone will modify or delete a resource that you don't want to. If it is an intentional activity, then obviously the coordination will happen and the thing will happen. So they are saying you can set a lock level to cannot delete and read only. In the portal, it is called delete and read only respectively. So what is cannot delete? Meaning the authorized users can read, obviously they can read and also modify. Meaning I can change my VM specification, but they cannot delete the resource. So if I have a cannot delete lock on a VM, then I can obviously get all the properties of the VM either programmatically or for example from the portal. I can update the VM, add disks to the VM, change the size of the VM, stop or start the VM, but I cannot delete the VM. Very important. Read only means authorized users can read the resource, but they can neither delete, just like cannot delete, but one extra thing is they cannot even update the resource. Applying lock is similar to restricting all authorized users to the permissions granted by the reader roles, as if that you are a reader. So even if you are a contributor to the subscription, so normally if you are a contributor to a subscription or a resource group, then you will have contributor access, meaning you can start, stop, this and that, delete. But in this case, resource locks are applied. If resource locks are applied, even if you are a contributor or a owner, still you will not be able to touch or delete based on the type of lock. So if you don't want your resource to even be modified, then apply the read only lock. If you want your users to be able to modify or make small changes to the resource, then you can but not delete, then you can apply cannot delete. So how, if still I want to delete or still I want to modify, then you have to remove the lock. Only authorized people can remove the lock, maybe also you have the permission to remove the lock. So remove the lock, do the action, and then maybe again apply the lock or something like that. So how locks are applied? So this is very important. When you apply a lock at a parent scope, all resources within that scope inherit the same lock. Even resources you add later will inherit the lock from the parent. The most restrictive lock in the inheritance takes precedence. So say you have a subscription, then a resource group, then a resource. So say I have applied a read, for example, a cannot delete lock at the resource group level. Okay, this means I cannot delete my resource group and I cannot delete all my resources within that resource group. So the locks are being inherited downstream, meaning my child resources of a resource group will inherit the lock from the parent resource. Now in one use case, say you have a resource group with cannot delete, meaning you cannot delete any resources within the resource group. But that, what does that mean? That means you can modify the resources within the resource group, but say the resource within that resource group have a read only lock, meaning even though the resource group has a cannot delete, obviously it is getting inherited to the resource, but there is a more restrictive lock which is applied at the resource level, which is basically the cannot even update or modify, meaning the reader lock or read only lock. So the most restrictive lock will take precedence. Unlike role based access control, you use management locks to apply a restriction across all users and roles. So this is extremely different from RBAC. From RBAC, what you do? In RBAC, you apply configuration to your resources based on the user. So you can say this user is a reader. this user is a contributor, this user is an owner, but no, read-only log, the configuration is applied at the resource level, meaning if then in the resource I have applied a read-only log, then it doesn't matter whoever is accessing it, even if it's the owner of the subscription, it will still appear as if the owner is a reader, meaning he can only read, he cannot make any changes. So the concepts are extremely different. If you want to lock any activity at the resource level, use this kind of resource logs, cannot delete or read only. But if you want to provide access based on your users' roles and responsibilities and groups, then you use RBAC or role based access control. Another very important thing, resource manager logs only apply to operations which happen in the management plane, which consist of operations which are sent to management.azure.com. The logs don't restrict how the resources perform their own functions. Resource changes are restricted, but resource operations aren't restricted. What does this mean? Very important. Meaning, say I have a SQL database. In that SQL database, I have applied a read-only log. What does that mean? That I will not be able to change or modify the SQL database. Say I want to change it from a basic tier to a standard tier. I will not be able to do. But that does not mean that data within the resource, within the SQL database, say I have a stored procedure, it will also stop failing. No. All these logs at the management level or the management plane, which is preventing you from managing your resources, from deleting or reading your resources within the resource. Say you have a VM, if there is a code within the VM, say you have a function, if there is a code within the function, that is not getting stopped or started like that. So this is very important to understand. Okay. So for example, a read-only log on a SQL database will prevent you from deleting or modifying the database. It will not prevent you from creating or updating or deleting data in the database. Data transactions are permitted because those are not sent to the management plane. So if a stored procedure, Azure job, it will work. The SQL jobs will work. What will not work is basically the management of those resources from the portal level or from a basically from an Azure CLI level also. So any operations or any APIs that are directed to the management plane and not to the data plane. So there are two different planes, right? Management planes for management data is the data within the resource. Now see, this is very important and this is directly with our question. Applying read-only can lead to unexpected results because some operations that don't seem to modify the resource actually require actions that are blocked by the log. The read-only log can be applied to the resource or the resource group which contains the resource. Some common operations which are blocked by a read-only log. So even if you will think that okay, I will apply a read-only log, so this is not something that will be affected by this read-only log, but no, it will be affected by that also. So for example, a read-only log on a storage account will prevent all users from even listing the keys. So here we come back to the question, what was the question? To view the keys, but no, you will not be able to view the keys if you have applied a read-only log to the storage account which is containing the keys. Why? Because the list keys operation is handled through a post request and not a get request, because the returned keys are available for write operations. Because the keys which you are getting, you can use those keys to do write. That is why, since you do not have any access to do write, even the view key operation is also being blocked. So it is very important that a read-only log on a storage account will prevent all users from even listing the keys. So in our question, the view the keys, even though it will appear that view is something that normally if I have a read-only log, I should still be able to do, but no. Since viewing the keys, you get the keys which keys have write permissions, so Azure will effectively block you from even doing that, which is very important. Again, a read-only log on an app service resource will prevent the Visual Studio Server Explorer from displaying files for the resource, because that interaction requires write access. So for example, you are using Visual Studio and you are trying from the Visual Studio, you are opening Resource Explorer to try to see the contents of an app service. You are saying no, I am not getting the data. You are saying why? Because I am only trying to get the data, I am not trying to modify any operation, but no, it is being handled internally as a write operation, so it is preventing you. A read-only log on a resource group, that contains a virtual machine prevents all users from starting or restarting the virtual machine. This operation requires a post request. This still makes sense, because normally starting or restarting a virtual machine, you will not normally think of it as a read-only operation, right? So, we will think of it as a modification operation only, and since they also happen over post API request, so you are going to not be able to do them also if you have applied a read-only lock. So, this is the most important part of the documentation which directly translates to our question. Now, this is hopefully now you are clear that what I have said is the correct answer. So, since B, C and D, none of them can happen, the only possible option is A. Now, before we close the call, okay, I will just explain a few small more things which is very important. So, for example, if you have applied a lock, okay, to a resource group which is created by Azure Backup Service, backups will start to fail. Okay, so the service supports a maximum of 18 restore points. If you apply a cannot delete lock, the backup service is unable to clean up the old restore points. So this is very important. So say I have applied a read-only cannot delete lock to my resource group. Normally I am thinking that everything is okay, because I don't want the VMs or any other SQL database within that resource group to be affected by or accidentally deleted or modified or whatever, accidentally deleted basically. But say I have the Azure backup resource group also similarly done as a cannot delete, or say I have applied the lock at a subscription level. Resource groups, all of the resource groups fall under that subscription, right? In this case, the issue is that since I have applied the cannot delete lock, the backup service itself will not be able to delete its old restore points, and since it only applies only can save up to 18 restore points, as soon as all those 18 restore points are exhausted, the backup service will start to fail. You will start getting unnecessary alerts. So these are very important things that you need to remember when applying the cannot delete lock. Another very useful thing before we end is that who can create or delete locks. So to create or delete management locks, you will have need access to this permission, Microsoft.authorization-star, Microsoft.authorization-logs-star. So for example, say you create a custom role, okay, and make it lock contributor or lock authorizer, and then you give that role this permission and this permission. Then any user who is assigned to that role for that subscription or resource group will be able to create or delete locks, nobody else. Out of the built-in roles, obviously the owner can do and the user access contributor can do, not the normal contributor, users access administrator. So even if you are a contributor, say you are a contributor, you try to delete something, okay, which is a genuine case, and you go there and you see, no, my resource group has been locked by something, or my resource has been locked due to a cannot delete lock, you will not be able to remove that lock. You have to contact someone who is a owner or a user access administrator within the scope of that resource group or the subscription, and then ask them to remove the lock, or ask yourself to be elevated via privileged identity management or something, whatever. But these are the important concepts. There is little bit more information in this documentation also, okay, so you can check it out later maybe, but as of now I hope this answer is clear. So the answer again is A, generate an automation script for RG1. B, C and D are stuff which you cannot do if you have applied a read-only lock. You cannot view the keys of the storage account, you cannot start the VM, you cannot upload the blob. Start and upload makes sense, and you cannot view the keys because this is a post operation which is not allowed by a read-only lock. Thank you everyone, and please share your feedback or comments so that we can continue later.